Visual rhetoric, from sight to schema. What is rhetoric? Visual rhetoric is the fairly recent development of a theoretical framework describing how visual images communicate, as opposed to aerial, verbal, or other messages. Visual rhetoric generally falls under a group of terms which all encompass visual literacy. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion, the art of human expressiveness, and the art of crafting attention. Visual rhetoric can be either a negative or positive thing depending on how seen from an outside perspective. There are different premises of sight and how someone sees something. Sight depends from person to person and is not a universal thing. The premises include, starting with the first one, sight demands interpretations. Interpretations are left up to each individual on how they interpret or see things in their own eyes from own and shared experiences in life. The interpretations that one might capture are used for their own use, not saying they couldn't tell someone or try to persuade them into thinking that way, but everyone has different feelings. Visual images can be interpreted many different ways, and that's one thing that will always stay true. Next, sight frames our attention. Everywhere we go, we see images, and those images make us think a certain way. We notice things around us, we think about them at the time, maybe hours, days, years later, but visual images grabs and frames our sight. The premise that sight frames our attention is a basic thought, and most people don't even think about it. Images grab your attention with the use of color, layout, shapes, typography, nature, and architecture. Lastly, sight is cultural dependent. Depending on how you see culture and what type of culture you come from will depend heavily on how you see images. Some examples of differentiating factors could be timing, life experiences, education, culture, language, how you see/use media, your genre, and expectations. All those plus demographics and psychographics will make you see images differently. In order for someone to see an image the same, however, does not mean they share the same culture and the same level of class and etc. No two people are the same, so images and sight will always be varied. However, with all that being said about sight, the same can be said for rhetoric and the premises of it. Rhetoric demands interpretation, rhetoric frames our attention, rhetoric is culturally dependent. Dating back to Aristotle, rhetoric has used ethos, logos, and pathos for proof. While none are better than the others, they are all equally important. Ethos, simply the source's credibility, the speaker/author's authority. Logos, the logic used to support a claim, induction, and deduction, can also be facts and statistics used to help support the argument. Pathos, the emotional or motivational appeals, vivid language, emotional language, and numerous sensory details. Lastly, onward to schema. We draw from Sonia Foss's schema through a 3-step process on how to explain rhetorical criticism. Step 1. ID a function in the image. Interpret the physical data. Step 2. Assess how well that function is performed. And Step 3. Scrutinize the legitimacy of the function itself. Is the function ethical, desirable, good, just? So, rhetoric from sight to schema, while complicated, we learn that through sight there are 3 rules to keep in mind. Sight demands interpretation, sight frames our attention, and sight is culturally dependent. Those rules for sight are also true for rhetoric in general. With proof using ethos, logos, and pathos, we can break down images and can see their credibility, logic, and emotional appeals. To finalize it, we make sure to keep in mind the schema from Foss and his 3 steps by IDing the function, assessing the function, and scrutinizing the legitimacy of the function. Thanks.